Hello, listeners, and welcome to this special edition of the Ensign podcast, powered by ENS. I am David Asiedu, a commercial disputes partner in the Accra office of ENS. This episode will, in part, mark this year's edition of the GC Power List East Africa, a legal 500 publication that recognizes the leading general counsel in the region. ENS is proud to support this initiative, which shines a light on in-house lawyers who play a vital role in the success of East Africa's businesses. In this episode, we will explore the industries driving growth in East Africa, the continued rise of M&A activity, and how technology is reshaping legal practice. We will also look at the challenges and opportunities of cross-border work. To guide this discussion, I'm joined by three of my colleague partners from ENS, each with deep experience in the East African region. First, there is Rehema Ssemyalo, a partner in the Uganda office whose practice includes M&A, capital markets, corporate restructuring, and general corporate and commercial. Rehema, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, David.
Second is Anthony Gakuru, a partner in the Kenya office of ENS, whose practice area includes private equity, technology, media and telecommunications, capital markets, and general corporate and commercial. Anthony, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, David. Pleased to be here.
Pleased to have you. Next, we have Dieudonné Nzafashwanayo, a partner in the Rwanda office of ENS with experience in areas including tax, project development, employment, and general corporate and commercial. Dieudonné, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thanks, David.
Welcome. Ladies and gents, let's jump straight into it. Let's talk about key industries driving growth in your countries in East Africa. So across East Africa, certain industries are becoming the engines of growth, from fintech innovations in Kenya to infrastructure and energy projects in Rwanda and Uganda. These sectors are shaping the region's economic future. Each country has its own story, but there are also common threads of opportunity. We'll start with Rehema. In Uganda, which industries are driving the most growth right now, and what's the reason behind it?
Yeah, thank you, David. So I'd like to highlight three key areas. The first is agro-industrialization. Our agriculture sector has experienced a surge of growth over the past few financial years, and there's really a drive to move towards value addition and export. So that's really driving growth. Take the coffee sector, for example. I think that's the subsector that's registered the most growth. And if I can give you some statistics,
Sure.
just to put it into context. In terms of volume, if you compare the past two financial years, our coffee exports have grown by 27%. And then in terms of value, it's grown by 93%. So that's really, really significant.
Yeah.
Now, in addition to coffee, other subsectors in the agriculture sector is dairy processing. The government just signed a big agreement with Algeria, I believe, to do some export of dairy products. We also other sectors that contribute include fruit and vegetable processing, edible oils, as well as textiles. So that's the first key sector that's driving growth. The second area is services, specifically tourism, retail, e-mobility, and by e-mobility I mean the border ecosystem, and then real estate as well. There's been quite a significant growth in the tourism sector. The other day on the news, our Civil Aviation Authority was boasting about how they recorded the highest number of passengers coming through and out of Entebbe for the month of July. But I think for full disclosure, we hosted the African Cup together with Tanzania and Kenya in that month. So that probably was the reason for such an upsurge in the numbers. But I think on a whole, this increase in numbers is partly because we now have a new a national carrier, which has opened up very many routes, and it's now so much easier to access the rest of Africa because of Uganda Airlines. We've seen more airlines just opening up shop and starting to come to the country. So that's really contributed to the tourism sector. Then on the real estate side, if you take a drive through the streets of Kampala, you see a lot of multi-purpose developments coming up. And this probably could be explained because of the rising levels of income, but there's also a lot of growth in the real estate sector. The last opportunity is the upcoming oil and gas. I know that this has been in the pipeline for very many years, but we now expect fast oil in 2026, and our Ministry of Energy estimates that we'll earn about $15 billion in this sector. And I think already we're seeing that this spend is stimulating growth. We see jobs in the logistics space, in the construction space, as well as the professional services space. And just to comment on the why, I think for me sitting, in Kampala, this is not surprising. It's not surprising for me to see growth in these particular sectors. And this is because our government has been very intentional lately. So our government has come up with an ambitious plan to grow our gross domestic product by tenfold by 2040, from the current about 50 billion USD or thereabout to 500 billion USD in 2040. And they've identified certain sectors that they want to focus on to drive this growth. And, already you're starting to see, the sectors responding to the government policy and direction. So for me, it's not surprising to see that this indeed are the sectors that are driving the economy. Thank you, David.
Thank you. That's both fascinating and ambitious. Let's go to Anthony and Kenya. So what industries are driving the most growth right now, and why?
Thank you so much, David. Look, I think just based on what Rehema has said, the conversation across East Africa on growth is usually the same.
Yeah.
And you look at agriculture as one of the industries which is driving key growth. So for Kenya in Q1 2025, we had a 4.9% growth in the GDP, driven largely by agriculture and manufacturing. And this is largely attributed, out of good weather, as well as increased demand of exports. The export products remain, again, largely what Rehema has said is happening in Uganda. You're looking at tea, coffee, horticulture. We're exporting lots of flowers outside to Europe. So agriculture remains one of the key drivers of growth in the market. The other sector which is driving growth in the market is manufacturing. And there was a huge ambitious plan by Kenya, to become a second world country by 2030. Whether we are there or not in the next 5 years, that's a question which we can debate. But manufacturing is one of the key elements, and there's a huge policy by the Kenya Association of Manufacturers to push for local manufacturing of goods. The other sector which is leading to growth of the economy is construction and real estate. It was quite interesting when Rehema said, if you walk around Uganda, you'll appreciate the construction which is going on. I mean, if you do the same in Kenya, just a drive from JKI airport into Westlands, into the CBD, there's lots of infrastructure projects going on, roads going on, apartments, buildings coming up. You've got office premises coming up. So the construction and real estate is one of the key drivers of economy. There is also an upward trend in the tourism sector, especially having come from the COVID slump. we've seen huge increase in terms of tourists coming into the country. We've had cruise ships now dock into Mombasa. So tourism is driving, a huge chunk of the growth in the industry. Lastly is the services industry. I know Kenya is quite big on fintech, and M-Pesa, which is a mobile money transfer service, is one of the key drivers of money movement in the country. So apart from M-Pesa, which is quite widely known, we've seen lots of activity in the insurance industries, where we've got multinationals investing in Kenyan companies. We've seen acquisitions in the banking industry. The capital markets, although they are not as active as we would want them to be, we have seen an increase in the market capitalization at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. So I'd say those are largely the areas which are driving growth in Kenya: agriculture, manufacturing, construction, tourism. We've got some niche areas like renewable energy, climate adaptation, etc., which are coming up. But whether they will have a real impact on the economy, I mean, that's a conversation we can always have. Yeah, that's it from me, David.
That's fascinating too, especially the mix of what you might call traditional sectors and what's totally avant-garde or new. That's interesting. And I liked that about the ambition to become a second world country. I love it. And I know you were a bit you were kind of trying to hold our excitement about it for Kenya, but that's exciting. Let's move on to Rwanda and Dieudonné. Same question. Which industries are driving the most growth in Rwanda right now, and what's the reason behind it?
Thank you very much, David. So Rwanda is not much different from Kenya and Uganda. And maybe to set some context, so the statistics in case that the GDP in the first quarter of 2025 grew by 7.8%, and the industries driving growth general ranges from services, manufacturing, and agribusiness, and particularly in the service industry. So financial services are dominating, including fintech and asset management, and fintech for obvious reasons, because this has been seen as a tool for achieving financial inclusivity, and then asset management. So we are having a lot of funds being set up in Rwanda as part of the super ambitious project, positioning Rwanda as an international financial center and also a gateway for business, spreading their wings to the rest of the African continent. The second sector in the service industry that is also fueling growth is hospitality, for obvious reasons, because over the last few years, Rwanda has also been, promoting the MICE Meeting Incentives Conference and exhibitions tourism, and this is also contributing significantly to the growth of our economy. In construction, we are also having quite a lot of significant projects ongoing, including the construction of the Bugesera International Airport, which is expected to be a regional hub as far as air transportation is concerned. We are having skyscrapers, being put up, and high-end residential buildings, being built in town, and all these, are really contributing to the growth of our economy. There's also agribusiness, which is also being focused on by the government. So we've had a chunk of land reserved and prepared, with irrigation facilities and everything, and these are going to be used for commercial agriculture, and all these, put together are the sector that are really, fueling the growth in Rwanda. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Dieudonné. Rwanda always punching above its weight. Let's move to another topic, M&A activity and deal structuring. So obviously, when one listens to or reads anything about East Africa, you hear about hot sectors like sectors in mergers and acquisitions, like energy, telecoms, financial services, which I think all of you, especially Anthony, have talked about. We also hear buzzwords like regulatory environments, currency pressures, local content rules. And these are shifts that appear from my end to be shaping how transactions get done in the East African region. So my question, and first to Anthony, is what are the notable M&A trends and deal structuring patterns you are seeing in Kenya?
Thanks, David. It's quite an interesting time for you to ask that question because I know world over and even in East Africa, we are seeing fewer deals in the M&A side. Now, from a Kenya perspective, I mean that's the same. The M&A deals are not as many as we usually tend to see, especially in Q1 and Q2 of 2025. However, the ticket value for the transaction seems to be on the higher end. So while we're looking at fewer deals, the trend seems to be fewer deals, yes, but then you're also looking at big ticket deals, which hopefully we'll just hear from Rehema and Dieudonné whether that's a trend, but that seems to be the position in Kenya. In terms of sector focus, we've seen lots of activity in fintech, lots of private equity investments into fintech or agri-tech or health tech oriented entities in Kenya. Again, like I said before, this is largely driven out of the use of M-Pesa in the Kenya market, which is a mobile money transfer services. And so you will find that most industries will try to capitalize on the use of M-Pesa in the market, leading to growth in the fintech space. The players remain largely the same for M&A. You're looking at private equity investors, VC investors, cross-border multinational investors. I guess one of the key differences we are seeing in the trends is most of the private equities are moving from traditional private equity to private debt, which means the structure in the M&A deals is moving slightly, I'd say, moving away from your traditional share purchase agreements or subscription agreements to debt-like agreements, which includes notes and includes issuance of convertible preference shares. So those are some of the trends which we're seeing in the M&A space in Kenya.
Thanks, Anthony. Interesting about the lower deal count, but the higher deal values, and also the sophistication in the kinds of investments or transactions that are going on in Kenya. Let me bring the conversation to Dieudonné and the notable M&A trends and deal structuring patterns you're seeing in Rwanda right now.
Thanks, David. So similar to Kenya, even Rwanda, the M&A space has been more or less slow, at least in this year. But of course, looking at the few transactions that are taking place, so the ticket size is getting a bit bigger compared to the previous transactions. And in terms of sectors, so we can see telecommunication, infrastructure, financial sector, and power projects, and of course, we also have in private equity, firms also investing in certain assets, in Rwanda. When it comes to deal structure patterns. This is quite standard. So most of the transactions are structured either as a purchase of shares from the existing shareholders who will be exiting or reducing their stake, and share subscription in case of need of more funds to run the business. So, but of course we've noted certain changes in how transactions are structured. So recently, most of the investors are using Rwandan holding companies for the purposes of executing their M&A deals, and this may own to the fact that as part of the Kigali International Financial Project I alluded to, Rwanda has introduced a lot of incentives. So those pure holding companies are being used to tap into those incentives, particularly those relating to tax, efficient repatriation of profits. So the holding companies are also being used to utilize acquisition finance, especially when transactions are structured as a leverage buyout. So, and of course, in those cases, in such situation, post closing, those holding companies that have been set up for the purpose of utilizing acquisition finance, they are consolidated or merged with the target so that the debt can be serviced by the target. So those are quite generally the sort of trends in terms of structuring you can observe on our market. Thank you.
Interesting. Thanks for that, Didi. Rehema, what pearls of information do you have to share on M&A trends and deal structuring patterns from the Pearl of Africa?
Yeah, thank you, David. It's so interesting to hear that both Dieudonné and Anthony have observed less M&A deals. It's a bit different from where I sit. I think that we've seen an uptick in M&A trends in Uganda particularly this year, when you compare to maybe the past 2 to 3 years. In fact, we're now practicing, the traditional M&A as we know it, as we used to practice it. I feel that this year we've gone back to practicing the traditional M&A. But I observed that most deals are done from a strategic point of view. So we see more deals from strategic investors as compared to private equity funds. So there's been not as many deals from the private equity side, but I think on a whole, I've seen an uptick in M&A deals in this particular financial year. But maybe just to shift the conversation away from these typical trends, I just want to highlight that in Uganda, competition law is now center stage for us, and this is because we didn't ever have competition law before. Our law was passed. Our Competition Act was passed in 2024, and even after it was passed, it wasn't implemented because there were no regulations. There were no regulations to operationalize, so regulations to specify thresholds, specify processes of merger notifications. So we had a law, but there were no regulations. Sometime last month, the regulations were listed in the Gazette. A copy of the regulations has not been published yet, but at least they've been listed in the Gazette. And what this means is that we'll soon need to be complying with competition law. And again, what this means for deal structurings is that we're going to see a lot of changes in the way we structure deals. We're going to see we now have to provide for longer waiting periods. Before the competition law, you could have a back-to-back signing and closing. But now that's going to change because we now have to wait for regulatory clearance, and that takes up to 120 days. So I see that as going to have a big impact on the way we practice M&A in Uganda. And then on top of this, if you follow M&A news, you'll have seen that effective 1st November 2025, the East African Competition Commission will start receiving notifications, merger notifications. So that's an added layer. So really, for us in Uganda, there's just this added layer of compliance in the M&A space that's going to, it's going to be quite interesting for us to now negotiate things like interim periods and completion accounts, etc. That hitherto we used to have really simple purchase agreements. And then I'd like to just touch on the currency and foreign exchange point. And I know that this is a big issue in Africa generally. I attended a webinar once, and it was quite interesting to hear the challenges people face when it comes to exchange controls. But it's not the case for Uganda. We have a fully liberalized currency. We have a fully liberalized foreign exchange system. You don't need to get approvals from the Bank of Uganda or any regulatory authority to, exchange money or expatriate funds. And I think this is a strong, attractive position for us as Ugandans. And yes, thank you, David.
Thank you. So I was in East Africa. Well, I was in Uganda just last week and for an insurance conference, and it was fascinating to see how the countries of East Africa appear to hold hands with one another and walk to the same or dance to the same beat. So it's interesting to see that even within that, there are still in-country differences. Let me move to tech-driven change in legal practice. Technology is transforming legal practice across Africa in general and East Africa in particular, from digital tools that streamline due diligence to AI platforms that support research and drafting. Both law firms and law departments in companies appear to be under pressure to adapt quickly, balancing efficiency gains with concerns about cost, training, and client expectations. So that's the background. How are lawyers and law firms in your market adapting to technology-driven change in the legal space? Let's start with Rwanda and Dieudonné.
Well, thanks, David. So it's clear this, technological disruption, particularly AI, are here to stay, and one of the sectors that are definitely going to be affected or have been affected, if I can put it that way, is the legal sector. So, and at least in the case of Rwanda, so the legal practitioners and in-house lawyers are also trying to adapt. Speaking for the case of us, for instance, so we've been rolling out some technological tools, including AI, to perform routine functions requiring limited human judgment, things like diligence, the research, drafting, but also we are also using this even in terms of pricing and the resource of people capacity management. Now, in terms of in-house practice or for in-house lawyers, this is a bit different because if you were to look at the level at which they are using AI, it's not as advanced as private practice. Because for private practice, I think there's also this need to achieve efficiency and reducing cost to client. But for in-house, these tools are more being used, in relation to compliance tracking, for instance, and those other similar routine, tasks, if I can put it that way. So thank you.
Thank you, Dieudonné, for that. Let's go to Uganda and Rehema.
Yeah, I think that the legal profession is registering steady progress. I think people have adopted technology and are using technology. So let's start from the law firms, especially when you look at larger firms, especially those that have international affiliations. People use AI, like Dieudonné said. People use AI. It's routine these days to use AI for document review, drafting, legal analysis, due diligence, and then also, as is the case globally, so the shift to hybrid working that was brought about by COVID has just required for firms to just adopt to cloud practice management systems to then allow for the hybrid working, because it's here to stay. So on a front, I think that there's been positive adaptability to technology, to artificial intelligence on the market. There's also an upskilling drive by our Uganda Law Society. So the ULS will holds regular virtual and masterclass trainings for lawyers, where the lesson is just about AI and how you can use AI to improve efficiencies. And then I'd also like to just touch on our government and their shift towards just digitizing government systems. So our company's registry is now 100% online. Our government has also digitized its public procurement as well as payment systems. This has registered a significant reduction in corruption when it comes to executing government contracts. I think, David, you'll also be aware that even the courts have online filing systems. So so this adoption of technology by our government has really made the legal practice a whole different animal to what we knew when I started practice many years ago. It's totally different the way we practice law these days. So I think that on a whole, there's steady progress and it's here to stay. We'll continue. The legal profession will continue to use and grow and adapt with the technology. Thank you, David.
You're welcome. So, Anthony, how are lawyers in Kenya, both in law firms and in-house, adapting to technology-driven change? And I ask you this with a confession that sitting in Ghana, I look over at Kenya, which has almost basically automated and brought the full force of technology to its dispute resolution, in particular litigation practice, where everything is gone virtual or online. I look at this with a lot of positive envy. What's going on in Kenya?
Thanks, David. Good to hear that. You're looking at Kenya as one of the key markets to look at in terms of tech and AI development. But I think the best place for me to start will be there's an increased use of tech and AI in law firms, and I think ENS is one of the firms which is pioneering this. And not just in Kenya, but across East Africa, across our Ghana office, South Africa office, Mauritius office. We are one of the first law firms in Africa to actually adopt Harvey AI, which is an artificial intelligence platform which makes legal tasks which would take a long time to take shorter time. So it brings efficiency into the whole practice management, provision of services to client. It assists in contract analysis. It augments the due diligence process. Helps us analyze different laws in different markets. So before I just dive into how Kenya is good, David, as you have mentioned, I think, and not to blow our own horn, but then I'd like to start with, AI as one of the best legal AI tools in the market. Now, you're right. Look, David, in response to the COVID 2019 pandemic, what the Kenya judiciary did was to adopt e-filing, electronic case management, and virtual hearings, to ensure we've got continued access to justice at the time of lockdowns. So this has gone on following, opening up of the market after COVID, and what you have is increased e-filings, increased online case management, which just shows where the world is going. Look, we do not have to print documents, take them to the courtrooms, attend to physical hearings. I think technology just makes it easy to move justice to the systems and to the people. Apart from your judiciary system, which is heavily electronic. We've got ODR platforms, which are online dispute resolution platforms, like the Nairobi Center for International Arbitration, which allows for online sessions as opposed to in-person sessions. And, this just enhances the whole dispute resolution efficiency. Apart from that, I know law firms in Kenya are heavy on cloud-based management, storage of documents on the cloud as opposed to your usual printing and storing them on files, etc. So we've seen an upward trend in terms of using cloud-based management policies. I've seen a few law firms coming up which are literally online. Yeah, so they do not have physical presence, and
Imagine that.
yeah,
Imagine that.
and that's where we're going. Look, and it seems to work for venture capitalists or foreign clients who would want to engage with some of these law firms without visiting the physical offices. So I guess we just have to keep up with technology. It's here, it's going to stay. And while, you might have some of these law firms being online, I guess most, if not all law firms have also transitioned to that kind of a model. Look, we are here just doing a podcast to, promote the GC awards, etc., which is something which you would not have had before. We would all have had to meet in Nairobi and sit in a panel to discuss. So I guess there are huge steps which have been taken in the legal profession towards adapting technology, and we are also using it for the growth of the law as well as the practice itself.
Thank you, Tony. We're bouncing all over the place from tech now to cross-border transactions and disputes. Cross-border work is a growing feature of East Africa's legal and business landscape. Transactions that span multiple jurisdictions create real opportunities, but they also bring challenges from navigating different, maybe slightly different regulatory regimes to resolving disputes across borders. How these issues are handled can make or break cross-border deals. I will come to Rehema first. What are the main challenges and opportunities you see in cross-border transactions and possibly dispute resolution in your market, which is Uganda?
Yeah, so I think I'd like to highlight 2 points on that. And the first thing is just to stress that it's very important to be aware of the local nuances, the local dynamics of the market that the transaction is going to happen. Take Uganda, for example. Integrity risk of local partners is becoming such a big concern in our market. So some of our local partners will sign onto deals, will default on their obligations, and then run to court to frustrate enforcement of these obligations. We have a high-profile case that's been going on in our courts for about 8 years between a Ugandan borrower and a South African investor, and really it's a typical case of people just simply not wanting to comply with the contracts that they've signed onto. And what this means is that for this South African investor, you have to wait, say, 10 years before you can enforce, or before you can realize that the money that you actually put into this business. So really the point there is it's very important to be aware of the local nuances. And I think some of these things maybe you can't anticipate, might be difficult to contract out of, but it's very important to be aware of them and be careful, about the local partners that you decide to enter into agreements with. So I think that's the first nuanced thing about Uganda that I wanted to highlight. Then, just to talk about governing law and venue, Uganda generally recognizes the principle of freedom of contract, which means that when it comes to these purchase agreements, transaction documents, parties are free to select whatever governing law they would like their agreement to be governed by, and to select whatever dispute resolution forum they'd like any disputes to be taken to. Now, increasingly, when advising foreign investors, we see that their preference is to select English law and land and arbitration for arbitrating disputes, even for relatively small size tickets. So, the tickets for a few hundred Uganda shillings, a foreign investor will ask the local founder to go to London to arbitrate. When you look at it from the foreign investor's point of view, it's reasonable. It's understandable, maybe not reasonable. It's understandable because they perhaps perceive the English legal system as more reliable and efficient when compared to Ugandan system. But for a founder investor in a small business worth a few hundred million Uganda shillings, this is a terrible mistake, and we've seen a lot of pushback from founder local Ugandans against English law and London-based arbitration. So what we try to do, David, is to just find a middle ground where we, ask parties or recommend to parties to adopt, say, English law, but then recommend for a closer venue or seat of arbitration like Nairobi or Kigali if the investor is not very comfortable arbitrating in Kampala. So that's how we've tried to find a middle ground on some of these challenges. But I think on a whole, success really depends on selecting trusted partners, and then it's important to adopt dispute resolution mechanisms that everyone can afford, because again, it's not enough for you to put this clause into your agreement if your counterpart is then going to have to run to the local courts to try to frustrate you because they feel that they are blocked out and they can't access justice. I know that we're caught up with time, David, so I'll just hand back the mic to you here. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fascinating stuff, especially that part where in a cross-border deal between, say, a European company and a Ugandan entity, they might see Nairobi as middle ground for dispute resolution. That's fascinating. Let's go over to Kenya and the main challenges and opportunities you see in cross-border transactions and dispute resolution. Anthony.
Thanks, David. I'll try, just cover this quickly in about 4 points. Look, the first one is on regulatory approvals and bottlenecks, which you find in the approval process. And I think when you're looking at a cross-border deal, which would extend into Kenya, you're looking at multiple regulators. You're looking at the Competition Authority of Kenya. You're looking at industry-specific regulators, such as the Capital Markets Authority, the Central Bank, etc. If I'm now doing a deal which would involve Rehema in Uganda, I have to look at the East Africa Competition Authority. So that's one of the challenge which you face when you're doing cross-border deals in East Africa and out of Kenya. And some of these regulatory approvals take quite some time. You're looking at about 6 to 12 months for some of them, which would mean that your deal completion is delayed. The second item, which comes as a challenge in terms of cross-border transactions, is foreign ownership requirements in Kenya, which apply to certain entities in the insurance industries and the mining industries, which would mean that if an investor wanted to buy 100% of, let's say, a holding company in Mauritius, which has subsidiaries in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, then the Kenya bid would have to be looked at in a peculiar manner, especially where it involves insurance industry. Because let's say for insurance industry, you can only get up to 66.67 ownership as a foreigner. Yeah, so that's one of the challenges we face. Of course, the opportunity for lawyers is to try and find deal structures which work in accordance with the law. So while there is some challenge, I mean, look, there's some opportunity for lawyers to be creative in terms of how they structure this international transaction. The other challenges which you will have to look at and which also present an opportunity for lawyers in Kenya will be how to structure tax. You've got elements of capital gains tax in share sale transactions. You've got stamp duty. You've got withholding tax of dividends. And while it presents a challenge while structuring cross-border opportunities, I mean, cross-border transactions, it also presents an opportunity for tax lawyers, especially to, come up with creative structures which are tax efficient to the clients, given the applicable market. The final point will be on political challenges. We've recently been having, lots of demonstrations in the country. And as an investor, as a lawyer, you'd have to look at how to hedge against any political uprisings, given the current environment in Kenya. We're looking at elections coming up in a couple of years. Again, if you're doing a cross-border transaction which involves Kenya, you'd have to look at, what happens before an election, what happens after an election, how am I structuring my cross-border transaction to ensure that I have captured the risks which come with Kenya around elections or political uprisings.
Thanks, Anthony. And Dieudonné?
Thanks, David. So, I mean, the challenges are quite, similar across the three jurisdictions, maybe apart from the political stability issue Anthony, alluded to as he concludes, which you don't have in Rwanda. So I think for that one, you're doing pretty well. So, but in terms of challenges, when it comes to executing cross-border deals and maybe handling cross-border disputes, so they're more about legal and regulatory landscape, differences in different, ESC countries, and the differences to do with court and the judicial system. So, of course, this creating opportunity, for instance, in alternative dispute resolution like arbitration, where you don't have to be, prone to whatever this that comes with, having, disputes, being, entertained or maybe settled before state courts. So there are tax issues, obviously. So including the risk of double taxation, on cross-border transaction. Because, for instance, in the East African community, so there was a project, to have a DTA, a double tax treaty between ESC countries. This was signed, but it's never been entered into force because some of the countries have not ratified it, and that continues also to be a challenge, in terms of flow of deals, at least between, ESC countries. There are also the overlapping regimes in terms of regulatory frameworks. For instance, if we talk of the M&A space, Rehema alluded to the ESC merger control regime becoming effective, in this year, and that means that, if the deal involves, countries in ESC and COMESA, so you would have to juggle how you're going to deal with that, because you may end up having to notify the transaction both to ESC Competition Authority and COMESA Competition Commission, and all those things, increasing, the cost for the transaction, and also, the closing timelines. But of course, as indicated by my colleagues, these are challenges on the business side, but creating opportunities, for lawyers to be innovative and trying to come up with practical solutions to to clients that would help them navigating these challenges as they conduct businesses in the region. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Dieudonné. So let's kind of round this exciting and energizing conversation off with reflections on the GC Power List. The Legal 500 GC Power List has highlighted outstanding general counsel across East Africa since it started, shining a light on the qualities that define leadership in today's in-house legal landscape. Beyond technical expertise, it points to resilience, to innovation, and the ability to guide organizations through challenges and uncertainty. My question to all of you is, what does the GC Power List reveal to you or remind you about leadership and excellence among legal professionals in East Africa? We'll start with Anthony here.
Thanks, David. I'll try to keep it short. Look, I think the GC Power List is doing the right thing. I think for a long time, General Counsel's role in legal practice as well as the development of law has not been recognized. And I keep on saying that some of my most learning in terms of how businesses operate, interposing with the law, has been with GCs. And, the value of the wisdom they bring to a transaction is unmatched because they understand the business and they understand the law. So it's easy for GCs to translate that to you as counsel and for you to be able to guide them. That way you work along together. So, the GC Power List would not have come at a better time. I think it recognizes the huge role which general counsels play, and having interacted with some of them, I think they do deserve to be on that list.
Thank you. And what do you have to say about it, Dieudonné?
Thanks, David. So, there is this author called Marshall Goldsmith. He wrote an interesting book entitled "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." So in that specific book, he talks about how recognition and reward systems in most organizations acknowledge the doing of something. Basically, that deal you made happen, the client you have bought, and rarely one will be recognized for the bad deal they have made the organization avoid, which would have maybe cost that organization everything. And if there are people who are really affected by this, where, this modus operandi are, lawyers, in-house lawyers, because they are like helping the organizations avoiding costly mistakes, but is rarely recognized. So the value CG Power List is bringing, or maybe what it reveals regarding the leadership and excellence of in-house lawyers. So it's really recognized that they are, albeit in different ways, significantly contributing to the success of the organization in the same way as maybe salespeople and strategists, in their respective organization. So, and I think, without this CG Power List, they would have continued to be, to be left behind. Yet their role or their contribution in the success of the organization is very, very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Dieudonné. Rehema, what does the GC Power List tell you about leadership and excellence among legal professionals in East Africa?
Yeah, so I completely share the sentiments, Anthony and Dieudonné's sentiments. I think it's first, like Anthony said, it's that recognition that GCs actually play more than just a legal advisory role. They're also business partners. They sit in strategic meetings. They direct, compliance to global standards. They drive ethics. They drive accountability. So all these things are really intangible, but they're very important when it comes to boosting investor confidence. They're very important when it comes to, generating value in the organizations that these GCs work. And so for me, just tying all the things that the GCs do to the legal 500 list and recognition, I think for me it's incredible. It's really a good thing that an organization has taken time to recognize and appreciate the huge role that GCs play in driving, compliance and driving global standards within organizations, and this is going to have a ripple effect to the rest of the country and the economy. So, just agree with the sentiments of both the panelists here, and just to appreciate the nominees on the GC Power List and to say hearty congratulations to them. Thank you, David.
Thank you, and I agree with all of you. Listeners, thanks for listening to this special episode of the Ensign podcast. Today's discussion has confirmed that East Africa's growth engines are spinning fast, deal structures are evolving by the quarter, technology is rewriting the rule book, and cross-border collaboration is the new normal. In this environment, the General Counsel is no longer a cost center. They are a strategic asset to companies. I just have to throw that in there. A special thank you to my exceptional colleagues, Rehema from Uganda, Anthony from Kenya, and Dieudonné from Rwanda for sharing frontline insights on East Africa. And big congrats to every GC featured in this year's Legal 500 GC Power List East Africa. Your work keeps companies compliant, competitive, and ultimately courageous enough to seize East Africa's vast opportunities. If this episode gave you fresh perspective, share it with a colleague. And if you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, drop us a note at ENS. See you next time. Bye-bye.